Hey, and welcome to Healthy Eating on a Budget. Glad you are here. This is always a fun topic. So we always want to start out with what is healthy eating? And really, we know that if we're eating healthy, we will actually have less cravings and less feeling for certain foods that we tend to crave. And when we crave foods, we tend to crave more of the foods that are more highly processed and sugar and so I will actually be sending you a resource called a cravings list. So if you have a certain craving, for example, sugar, what your body really needs is a certain vitamin, mineral, or phytochemical, and then it will list the items of like real whole foods that contain those vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. And because once we really get enough of the nutrients that we need in those vitamins and minerals, we will definitely have less cravings and we'll be less hungry. So that can also save us a lot of money in the long run because we're not as hungry because we're getting what we need. So healthy eating really surrounds that, and it's whole foods, whole real foods, minimally processed. Really the general rule of thumb when you're picking up an item in the grocery store is to look at the ingredients and not even the food label. First, we want to start with the ingredients. Do you recognize the ingredients? Are there words that you don't know that you can barely pronounce, or you don't even know what it is? And is sugar in there? So trying to get away from sugar and highly inflammatory foods. And so we're looking at the box and bags item with 5 ingredients or less, and that you can pronounce all the ingredients and you know what they are. And then really looking at healthy eating as balanced too, balanced meals, really looking at this plate, kind of a good indicator on, are you getting a lot of vitamins and minerals? So we're looking at, is half of your plate, even for breakfast, does it include some fruits and veggies? Does it include some grains and protein? And dairy is there too, but we know that we are really the only mammal in the world that drinks another mammal's milk past weaning. And so it always depends on the type of dairy, your source of dairy, and we can get a lot of calcium from vegetables as well and some other food sources. So just something to kind of research and think about. And then thinking about what does snacking mean to you, and can snacking be a part of really healthy eating, to making sure that you get enough vitamins and minerals, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So that's kind of the basis. Some of the common myths to healthy eating is that healthy foods cost too much money, and oftentimes, and sometimes it definitely can. However, when we are giving our body, what it needs in the form of real whole food, then, like I had mentioned before, we're less hungry and we're craving less foods, and then oftentimes we're less likely to be, going to the grocery store and feeling like, oh, I want these cookies or these other processed foods that really don't give much nutritional value to them. So so kind of thinking about what can you leave on the store shelf that doesn't have nutritional value, and then you'll have a little bit more money for some of those things that might be just a little bit more expensive than those. And I'll give you some resources and we'll talk about that. So oftentimes the words healthy and affordable really sometimes don't belong in the same sentence, and we'll hear this a lot as a common myth, and it isn't. So we can actually find some really healthy foods that really get a bang out of our buck, and we can afford it if we go kind of, and I'll share some tips with you. And there's another myth that fast food is cheaper than healthy food. And so not necessarily, we've done some price comparisons. If you go to McDonald's and you get a one-time meal for 5 people, it can actually be more expensive than going to the grocery store, picking up some ingredients, which you can use in many different ways over the week. So, doing some of those price comparisons, it's kind of eye-opening to know that fast food isn't as cheap as we think it is. And then plus, it's not giving us the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals that we need, and we'll be more apt to have more cravings and need more food, and we'll actually need to eat more. So, okay, so let's take a look at this. Looking at the 200-calorie foods. So on the right here, we have some yellow, red, and orange peppers, sweet peppers that is, worth about 200 calories. And then on the left, we have a 200 calories worth of like jelly beans. And so we can get more bulk and more nutrients worth 200 calories that can actually be a lot more healing and cause less cravings and not promote inflammation in our body. And so kind of looking at how much you can eat when it relates to more of a healthy food, as it relates to caloric wise. So definitely getting more food with healthier options. So can you eat on a tight budget? This is a question we get all the time, and yes, definitely. But it takes some time. It takes some work. It takes some planning. It takes shopping and preparing to definitely save you money and time as it relates to kind of moving forward. So the money saving tip of the day is eat out less. That is one thing that's a top tip that I can give you, because we know that going out to eat is really expensive. And if you use that money to go grocery shopping and really plan out, like really meal plan, you might be able to eat 7 meals or more with that amount that it took to go out to eat, depending on where you eat. So here are some money saving tips. So meal planning is definitely the way to go. Really looking at, there's definitely different ways to do meal planning, and I'm actually going to send some meal planning tips to you as a resource so that you can kind of look at it and say, well, will this work? Some people love to meal plan. Other people, it's hard to get started. So, but when we can meal plan, when we can purchase something and then use that item in a couple of different ways, so it doesn't feel like we're eating the same thing all week, it definitely gets easier. And then definitely one thing that I hear a lot is, I make something at home and we don't feel like eating it as a leftover because, then we feel like we're eating the same thing day after day. Definitely look into making sure that it's stored well, either in your refrigerator or freezer, and know what's in there. So if you put something in the freezer, keep a list somewhere where that, oh my gosh, I put that leftover lasagna in there a week ago, we better take that out and thaw and eat it. And that's a really good money saving tip, is to keep that list, because then you're not throwing away food, which essentially is throwing away money. So, and then watch for sales, stock up on the kitchen basics. So oftentimes, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but looking at even coupons, which is a couple doors down there, and sales, it really depends on what is on sale. So grocery stores tend to have better food that's on sale or less amount than coupons. Coupons tend to be those foods that are more processed. And so one really good tip is, if you have a certain healthy food that it's kind of like your go-to staple, go directly to the manufacturer's or producer's website and then print off a coupon right from there. And then there's so many different different cost saving apps out there that you can try to see if those work for you as well. And so that's kind of the really looking, even though, if you're looking at some coupons and you're like, oh, that's really cheap, I'm gonna get that and that and that, but it's something that you don't normally get, then that's not saving you any money. And if it's highly processed, full of sugar, then you're not doing your body any good with getting the nutrients it needs. And then learn how much food costs. So do a lot of cost comparisons, try different stores. If you go to a Cub, that might be a little bit more expensive than if you went to a Rainbow or a different local store. So just really learning how much food costs in your local stores. And then look for alternatives as it relates to food, because oftentimes we can get like this really small box of sugary cereals that will last like a couple days versus like one ingredient oatmeal that you can really kind of juice up so it can taste really good, and it can taste different every day depending on what you add to it. And then look into local consumer supported agriculture, and that's what that is, where you literally go to a local farmer and you buy a box of vegetables from them, and you can even order like a summer's worth. So every week you get literally a box of vegetables and produce, and maybe even some fruit or meat from a local farmer every week through the summer. Farmers markets is a great place to go, especially at the end of the day when the farmers don't want to pack all the produce up again. They're more willing to sell it for a cheaper amount, and because they just want to get rid of that produce. So that's kind of a money saving tip, is kind of go to farmers market at the end of the hours that is posted. Or grow your own garden. We call that kind of growing your own cash. If you have kind of a staple that you really like as it relates to produce, just kind of perfecting that one staple, or a couple, like tomatoes and cucumbers, or whatever you really like. Just really focused on learning how to grow those, or having a big garden with a little bit of this and that. It definitely can make a huge difference, not only in your wallet, but also for your health. Some other ones as it relates to shopping is to shop with a list. Very important, and kind of stick with that list. Don't shop hungry, or you'll be more apt to grab things that you want. And of course that costs money, and by the time you're out of the grocery store, you've spent more money than you wanted to. And then just kind of have that awareness, and take a look at when you're going grocery shopping with other people and family members. Oftentimes if I go with one of my boys, all of a sudden I'll have things that I didn't intend to purchase in my cart. So if you can shop alone, and just really stick to that list. Buy seasonal produce. That we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, but seasonal produce tends to be a little bit less expensive than produce out of season, because it has a little bit longer to travel if it's out of season. Canned veggies are great. It's usually fresh, frozen, canned as it relates to overall freshness, but it's great to have some canned veggies to grab when you can. Ideally, it would be low sodium for overall health and wellness, but it's good to have some staples in your pantry. And then if you can buy in the bulk food section, that can definitely be kind of compare prices, but oftentimes you can find some really good price items there, because you're not purchasing that box and the bag that it comes in, which when we do buy box and bags, we're paying for that material as well. And then really avoiding those pre-packed snacks. So if you buy like a bag of something, and then right next to it there's like a box with a little bags of that snacks in there, like an example would be like nuts, where it's really convenient to have 100 calorie pack nuts already prepackaged for you to grab and go, but it will be more expensive. And so when you get home, opening up that container of nuts and then pre-packaging it yourself in little containers will save some money. Frozen vegetables, very, very good. Vegetables that are frozen tend to be flash frozen right at the peak of freshness. So they can actually have a little even more nutrients in them than sometimes fresh, because if fresh vegetables have been sitting around for a long time, they actually start losing their nutrients. So frozen is great. And then, sometimes we kind of get stuck on brands, but recommending buying store brands whenever you can. Oftentimes, the only thing different about store brands and a little bit fancier brand is the packaging, and that's it. They come from the exact same factory where they're packaged, and it's the same thing. And we've seen it. I've been to a bean canning facility down in Faribault, and the non-labeled bean cans were coming out of the chute, and these, this can went this way and these cans went this way, and this can got a label with an organic label, and then this can got a store brand label, and they were exact same bean. So it's kind of interesting how they how they label. It's the same thing. So kind of interesting. So store brands can be really, really good, and sometimes even better quality than the more fancier brands. And then the next thing is cooking. So money saving tips on cooking. If you don't know how to cook, definitely start practicing and learning the basic cooking and baking skills. If we can eat less outside of the house, we'll save a lot of money. And so it will be the best money saving technique that you will ever acquire is to cook at home, and make it a habit of taking your lunch and snacks to work with you, or instead of going out to eat. You can save a lot of money that way. And then really looking at portion control and balanced meals. So oftentimes I'll have a wellness coachee who wants to lose some weight, and that's the first thing we look is like, how are your portions, and let's do a food log and see where you're at. And oftentimes people are surprised to realize that they're not eating, or they're overeating. And so sometimes we just kind of cut everything in half, portion, not change anything, but cut everything in half. And they're amazed how much they've been eating that they haven't needed to. And that then, they cut their sandwich in half, and then they have half a sandwich for lunch the next day. And so kind of really spreads that food budget out that much more. Kind of they have double the budget then because of their portion control. So that can save a lot of money. Cook more and freeze, save leftovers for lunches and future dinners, all of those things. So if you're making a meal, let's say you have a pound of hamburger, maybe cook 2 pounds, and then you'll have some to freeze, or to make a meal that's a little bit different than the next day. So that can be very beneficial as it relates to that 4 o'clock slump of what is for dinner. And then you can kind of either look at your list to see what's in the freezer, or remember that, oh yeah, we have this. Let's see what we can figure out to eat this. Invest in a slow cooker. That's a really great way to kind of throw things in there, turn it on, put some spices in there, and then you have a whole new meal ready for you when it's time to eat. And then if you are able to kind of preserve or can your foods, especially if you have a garden, especially if you buy anything like a little bit more in bulk as it relates to a vegetable, being able to can those things, so then you have some staples for the winter time, or whenever you need them. So those are some basic things for cooking. Some other things to think about as it relates to really thinking about what we're eating is oftentimes when we kind of look at processed foods, and then we look at the food label and it says, okay, one handful of this is like 500 calories. And then we look at more of the high volume, nutrient dense foods. We tend to be able to eat a lot more, and get a little bit more nutrients, and be a little bit more fuller longer, and be more satisfied. Your body's not craving a lot of things. An example would be that whole versus refined grains. So let's look at like whole grain bread versus white bread. What happens is when we refine grains, we take all the nutrients out and we just basically use the germ, and not the other parts of the grain. And then what happens is we get this nice white bread that then we have to add back in the riboflavin and iron and all those good things that have been processed right out of it. And those items that have been put back in are not as bioavailable in our body, so our body doesn't absorb it and digest it the same way. And oftentimes, then what happens is when we're processing these grains so much, then we have to add in more ingredients to make it palatable, and maybe even add in more sugar and other items, then can kind of change how we digest it. And then or even our blood sugar may go up and then crash, and then we get more hungry and doesn't have any fiber in it. And versus like whole grains, your body knows what to do with it. The whole grain is in there. It has fiber, it has the nutrients naturally in it. You'll be able to utilize that, and you'll be more satisfied and fuller longer. So that can definitely save on just that, always being hungry and needing to eat more. So we're looking at the nutrient dense food. Another thing is looking at the brightly colored seasonal foods is a great way to kind of eat the rainbow, and eat foods that are kind of in their natural state, like our fruits and veggies, and beans and nuts and seeds, and things like that. Another way is planned, like meal planning, like I had mentioned before. So you plan your breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks. And once you have that planned out, then you don't, once you start to kind of do this, you don't have to think about it anymore. You still have to continue to plan for it, but it gets easier and easier the more that you do it. And then you can meet your caloric and nutritional needs. You'll have less cravings. Thinking about those portions again, once we start getting really used to eating healthy and nutrient dense foods, we actually can eat a lot less because our body's getting what it needs. And the ultimate goal is to maintain the healthy lifestyle, so we don't have to overthink these things, and really avoiding those fad diets, because that's a whole nother change. So the ultimate goal is to eat for a lifestyle, and go from there. So that I had talked about this earlier as it relates to eating seasonal produce and sale items. So, and here's an example. So grapes in the winter can cost up to $3 a pound, and grapes in the summer, when they're in season, can cost as low as $1 per pound. So winter is a great time to switch to raisins. And then like oranges in the winter, apples in the fall, peaches in the late summer, things like that. When they're actually in season, there's a plethora of amounts. So then, of course, they want them to sell. So then they go down in price when they're in season, and that's a really good way to save money. Stock your freezer. That's another way. So garden grown plants. Container gardening, things like that, and there's a lot of good websites on how to flash freeze and get those in your freezer, so you have those all winter long. Farmers market produce as well. Coupons for already frozen vegetables. Sometimes you can get a 10 for 10 deal, and then your freezer's stocked. And then cook intentional leftovers for the freezer and lunches, like I mentioned before. So I know my family doesn't like to eat the same thing the next day. So, making maybe even double, and then putting the other half in the freezer for next week, because then then it's done. And then you can just thaw it and throw it in the oven, and it's ready to go. And then another thing is focus on that dirty dozen and clean 15. So that's another really good way to focus on healthy eating without, without overspending. So we have the dirty dozen, which are those veggies that are really high in pesticides. And so we want to buy the organic version of them. And then the clean 15 are those vegetables that are conventionally grown, but they do not have very many pesticides, so you can buy them conventionally grown. So if we kind of look at this list, we can see which ones that we can maybe spend a little bit more on the organic ones, and then the ones that are conventionally grown, we can purchase those because they're on the clean 15. And I am actually going to send you a link to those from the environmental working group, who updates those every year. They do independent studies on that. So another way is to definitely skip the $1 off cereal coupons, because we know that oftentimes the coupons that are offered for those are high sugar, high artificial colors and flavors, and your body does not know how to really digest those things, and it can cause more chronic conditions than health. So opt for quick cooking oats, like I mentioned before, and add your own mix in. So you can add raw honey, real maple syrup, some chia seeds, fresh fruit, and you're getting more nutrients that way. And then you can mix it up and have different flavors for different meals. And then plan to use some leftovers for school lunches, work lunches, quick dinner fixes. So like meats can be made into sandwiches, sloppy joes, homemade pot pies, casseroles, pastas and soups, and the list is endless. Have quick breakfast items ready to go to avoid eating fast food or not eating at all. And so there's some examples here that offer a lot of good nutrients, so like Lara bars, fruit, yogurt, peanut butter or avocado toast, string cheese, bananas, mixed nuts, kind of some grab and go type of things. And keep a stash in the car to just avoid hunger, or the temptation to stop somewhere is always, a good thing. Eliminate sugar sweetened beverages. There's no nutrients in it. And so, high in sugar, and even really watching the diet or the no sugar drinks, like things with aspartame, they can actually cause you to crave more sugar, and your body doesn't know what to do with them, and can cause a lot of inflammation as well. And so we're leaving that pop, we're leaving those cookies, we're leaving those other low nutrient dense foods on the shelf. So then you have a couple more dollars for organic apples, or whatever that is, and make your own infused water. So that's a great way. I mean, especially I heard people say, oh, I hate water. And so what can you use to really make your water taste good for your enjoyment of drinking it? So adding some lemon, or some mint and watermelon, things like that, to make it taste really good. And then if you're looking at snacking, like how to really fill in those nutritional needs for your meals, and make sure that you're getting enough nutrients, we can look at snacks as a way to do that, to really fill in those nutrient things. But we're not eating a whole nother meal, because that would be a lot of money. We're looking at just something very simple, like 2 snacks a day, not 5 meals. And then getting that protein and carbohydrate mix, thinking about portion control. And there's some ideas here for you, just to kind of think of how can you get some really good protein and carbohydrates in there, so that you're satisfied, and then you can wait for your next meal. So, question for you. You can put your answers in the chat. How have you been successful in eating healthy on a budget? So what does it mean to you? What tips do you have? And I'll be coming back to this at the end, and we can kind of talk about them. So while I finish up, feel free to put that into the chat. So here's just some resources, and so this is for mostly Wright County, but it's here just to kind of show you what to kind of find and look for in the St. Paul area. So like a local farmers market, oftentimes there's a website that you can check out. Eatright.org is a great website to look at different money saving tips and different healthy food tips. ChooseMyPlate.gov, like I went over, it has that half of your plate is fruit and vegetables, and then you have some grains and some protein. And then we do have and checking out local orchards too. We have an orchard out here called Applejacks who only sprays their apple trees once, and so asking around and asking your local orchards, like, how do they treat their trees and what goes from there. And then also looking at your local food shelves. Oftentimes people think that they can't use local food shelves because it's only for people who are homeless or don't have any food, and that's not true. It's for anybody who needs it, and it's okay to if you're having a hard time or if you're really kind of tight on your budget, it's there for you to utilize. So, definitely utilize that. They want the food to go. So it's always good. And then if you have a Love Inc. in your area, they're also really good to help in those things. I will send you this some of these resources as it relates. Here's an article just talking about how sometimes we think that we spend a lot more money on food, but actually when we look at how much money our grandparents spent on food way back when, they actually spent a lot more money than we did. So that's something, if you want to read, I'll send that to you. So did anybody comment on, no comments? Oh, chat, okay, yes. Okay, air fryer, yes. Magical, fast, and uses less. Yeah, so the air fryer is a great tool to use. Definitely. Kidney disease, and you've been able to lower sodium by mixing own spices versus packets of seasoning in the store. Yes, Penzi's Spices is a great place. They have high quality spices. Great salt-free mixes. Yeah, they do. We really like Penzi's Spices too. And what's so great about kind of mixing your own spices is, you have this spice, this spice, this spice. You put them together. There's no fillers. There's no nothing that is artificial or anything. And then you have that individual spice that you can use for something else. So that is an awesome tip to mix your own spice mix, because we do know that there's a lot of fillers and things that you don't want to put on your food in those prepackaged spice mixes. So awesome. Yeah. Anything else as it